What's up, everybody? It's your boy Ed Savage here, and I'm gonna react to scary stories. Let's get this started. Wait a second. Can't hear it? I know. Alright, let me just do something here. Put my earbud right next to the mic and put max volume. Alright, and
First
go.
met Russell T. He was a fellow classmate. I remember he had blonde hair that was basically a rat tail growing into a mullet, and always wore neon shorts. He even wore cut-off
Hey,
muscle
yeah, I did
tees,
see that.
because
Yeah,
this was the
man.
early 90s. He
Thanks
always
for
had this
being
punk
thanks
ass.
for being the first one.
Anyways, he seemed older than all
So
the other
I'm just
kids.
reacting to a
I guess
scary
because he was
story.
allowed to do so many things that we weren't. Like ride his bike to and from school without an adult. And I'm pretty
I might even shit my pants, I'm not gonna lie. No, I'm just kidding.
sure he had been held back a year. I was always a little jealous of the former. I couldn't even ride a bike without training wheels. So all my life, I've been teased about being shorter than everyone else my age.
Hey, Son Goku. Son Gohan. What's up, man? How you doing?
From the age of
Just
4,
reacting to scary stories.
full-size t-shirts for kids my age would come down to my knees. I was used to being called names like Shorty, Small Fry, and Little Bit. Typical crap kids and adults taunt with. Tall privilege is a real thing, apparently. Anyway, having made lots of friends and with kindergarten fresh under my belt, I figured first grade would just be
Hope
more
you
of the
guys can
same.
hear this.
But nothing prepared me for the kind of bullying Russell T had in store for me. At first, it was just
Yeah, man. I'm
irritating
fine. I'm
stuff.
good.
I had long dark hair, and my mother bought me headbands of all different colors to coordinate with my outfits. On the playground, Russell would run me up, grab the headband off my head, and I'd spend the rest of the recess chasing him and yelling for him to give it back. Usually a teacher would intervene and tell him to return it, though. One time, she turned away as he was walking up to me to give it back. He told me under his breath to open my mouth. When I didn't, he jammed the headband between my teeth and patted my head, roughly saying, "Good girl," and then ran off, and turning his head back to look at me and
Please,
smile with
and
his
don't
eyes
forget to
narrowed
like
into
this
slits.
video. My goal
Other
is 5
times,
likes.
he would chase me, and if he caught
Alright,
me,
back to the
he'd try to
reaction.
kiss me. But that was pretty normalized behavior on the playground, so I just run over to the teacher until he gave up waiting on me. Once he just walked up to me, picked me under my armpits, and carried me over to the monkey bars. I never played on them because I was too short to reach them from the ladder, and they were spaced too far apart for me to cross. He lifted me up and told me that he'd let me go if I could just reach up and grab onto them. So I did, and he did let go of me much to my relief. But all I could do was hang there, as he reached up and slid his hand up inside one of my short legs and touched the edges of my underwear. I
What
gasped,
the
and looked
heck?
straight down to find him smiling at me, in a way I'd never seen another child smile.
Sorry.
The second time he tried to
Get
do
out of
that,
here.
I grabbed onto the monkey bars, kicked him in the face, and used him to break my fall when I let go. The teacher saw this, and obviously, I got into trouble. I tried to explain what he was doing, but I was embarrassed. I hadn't even learned a lot of the words I needed to say in order for her to understand exactly what was going on and why it wasn't okay. She just cut me off and just shook her head, smiling weirdly, saying, "He picks on you. It's because he likes you." I remember feeling completely shocked by her words. I didn't care how he felt, and what the hell did it matter for anyways? I just wanted to leave me alone. She was no help, and as I sat inside the chalk square section off for kids who were in the timeout, Russell ran past me laughing and pointing. Then he did the Michael Jackson crotch grab and ran off.
What?
I was disgusted. I started to dread recess, so
What the
I
heck?
purposely get answers on my worksheets wrong, so I would have
Why?
to sit inside and redo it with the teacher's help, while she graded other stuff or made decorations for the classroom. It was peaceful, but soon it made things worse. We had a classroom activity for learning letters, where we would line up in a circle and draw the letter we were learning on the back of the person in front of us with our fingers. Girls would usually try to go behind other girls, and boys would try to go behind other boys, but even if it didn't end up that way, nothing ever happened besides little kids drawing on each other's backs. And don't ask me why Miss Olson decided this was an effective learning technique. I had no clue. All I know is that all the hairs on my neck stood straight up, as I realized Russell had just ran across the room so he could stand behind me. The letter that day was T. The teacher had us draw the horizontal line first, then the
Yeah, I
long
hope
line.
this is not, boring for you
I could
guys.
feel his eyes looking down on me,
I
and I
just
wanted
wanted to
nothing
do
more
this
than to
for
run
so
back to
long.
my seat.
To
He
react to
drew the
scary
first line with his
stories.
finger across my
You know what?
shoulder
And I'm
blades,
gonna react
and I remember
to
the second he
scary
touched me with
stories
his
at
mild
3
hand,
a.m.
my
just for
whole
the
body
heck of
felt
it,
like
right?
shriveling up. Then came the vertical line. I drew mine on the girl in front of me and stopped when I got to her waist. Russell went past my waist, past my lower back, and down, 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 until it was touching me between my legs. I felt sick. Now, mind you, we weren't taught about bad touches in school just yet, but I knew this was a bad touch. If it had been an adult who touched me, I probably would have felt way more certain and way more capable of telling, but if this was another child, and somehow it bewildered me to the point of silence. I can't even explain now how frozen I felt. I was just confused. The teacher had us draw the letter T 3 more times before she let us sit back down, and as I walked back to my seat, I felt hollow and couldn't concentrate the rest of the day. Why did I feel like something had been taken away from me? Why did I feel so ashamed, I asked. I know you'll want to know why I didn't tell my parents, but I'll keep the explanation short. I grew up with parents who taught me my body didn't belong to me and did not believe me when I told them about the stuff like this. Now, later in the school year, my mother volunteered to chaperone a field trip to the zoo, and Russell, a friend of his, plus a friend of mine were all put in my mom's group. My mom is loud, but
Is that like a bug? Do you see that,
a
guys?
lot of kids were scared of her or tried to avoid her attention. Not Russell T, though. He openly told her to shut up, told her she was ugly and talked stupid, flipped her off, and deserted the group with his friend more than once. I remember her dismay as she shook her head, saying, "Wow, you don't treat me like a grown-up, you know." I, of course, agreed. When we were back on the bus, he repeatedly kicked the back of our seat and tried to snatch the sunglasses off my mom's head. She really wanted to slap him and almost did, until my teacher had him sit up in front with her. And then he behaved. But as the bus approached the school and the teacher was distracted talking to the driver, he looked behind me and drew his finger over his throat and smiled. I don't think my mom saw, or else she would have done something about it. My mom lingered outside the classroom while I got my things. Usually she drove or rode her bike, but this time she had walked. We lived 2 or 3 residential streets up from the school, so she took my bag from me and we began walking home. Now, guess who also walked home with his older brother? Yup. He called my name and then yelled, "Hey, stupid!" I was shocked because I realized he was addressing my mother. He threw an empty Coke can at her, then a rock, all while she yelled at him and his brother laughed. She even had an umbrella in her hand at one point, and I thought she was going to beat him over the head with it. But as soon as she took a step towards him, he and his bro ran off down what I assume was their street, and we were left in peace for the rest of our walk home. Next week, I was back in class. The teacher said, "Okay, everybody, line up." I went over to a girl named Amanda and asked her if she would be behind me. She smiled, and she said sure, and a wave of relief washed over me. It was short-lived, however, because Russell pushed her out of line roughly, and although she was very vocal and pushed him back, he would not let her back in behind me, and our teacher called her out impatiently, telling her to get in line, so she had no choice but to get behind me. Now, the letter today was B. The teacher had us draw the vertical line down, and Russell just kept going down and down my back, but this time he lingered. The teacher wasn't watching, and he lowered his head down to my shoulder and whispered behind me, "You like that? You like when I touch you there?" I didn't like it. I hated it. I hated him, and I wanted to hurt him.
What?
I wanted him to be punished, and at the same time, I felt so ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know what was happening to me, but as I mentioned before, I was too embarrassed, plus my teacher kept turning around every time he did it. Really, I see now I couldn't believe it was happening, that it was being allowed without my permission. He didn't even care if he had it or not, and he was getting away with it. He loved that he was getting away with it. He put both hands on my shoulders and traced down the sides of my body down my waist. Then he started drawing the letter again. I heard him snicker under his breath and whisper, "I like how little you are, you know." If anyone else had said that to me, it probably would have felt nice. It was something I was usually teased about, something people brought to my attention in order to make me acknowledge I was different from them and everyone else. But when he said it, I just felt disgusted.
I think I would have told my mom just straight there.
I wish I had done something. Screamed, kicked him in the nuts. He just seemed so unfazed and untouchable. I was furious, and I still am. Sometimes we would have library time with another class, and I remember one day we got to watch a video about insects, and there were not enough chairs, so a few kids had to sit on the floor. I got to sit in a front row chair because I was so short. The librarian wanted to be sure I could see. I was wearing a dress with white stockings that day. The librarian turned out the lights, and all of a sudden, someone was sitting right in front of my chair. When she pressed the play button, the video illuminated the dark room, I was able to see the person in front of me was Russell. He kept scooting back, and I tried to kick him in the head, until he reached back to hook his arm around my legs tightly. He stroked his hand up and down my stocking legs, and tried to get his hand between them. My feet didn't even touch the floor.
You know
If
how
they
bad I
had,
would
I
have
would've
socked the
stomped
shit out
down
this
his
nigga,
leg.
yo.
I raised my hand
But
to go to
he
the
was
bathroom,
probably a
and when I
kid, so it
returned,
probably
I
won't
sat on
phase
the
him at
floor in the
all.
back. Russell turned around and saw me and told the librarian I was out of my seat. She shushed him and walked me back to my seat, but didn't leave. She stayed next to us the whole time, and he didn't try anything else. Now, fast forward some time. I was so relieved when the school year ended because I thought that the summer would be Russell free, and it was. Until, of course, one weekend my parents decided to have a garage sale. My dad put signs up at the end of our street, and my mom set up tables with different things on them that had bright round stickers marked with prices. She let me have a few blank stickers to draw faces on, and I remember my dad was selling his motorcycle as well. I played out in the front yard, and people parked their cars on the side of the street walking up our driveway, waving at me and saying hello. Now at this point, I heard a loud muffler and looked up, and saw a beat-up truck approach slowly. It idled as it came to our house, same as the other cars had, but for some reason, I turned around and looked up at it. My heart almost stopped and my stomach dropped. There he was, inside the truck with a dog, a young man with long hair, and an older man who was dressed like a biker. The dog barked viciously down at me, and Russell leered from behind the driver's seat. In my head, I was freaking out, because now he knew where I lived. I assumed the man was Russell's father, and the young man was his oldest brother. They all had that hungry, predatory look in their eyes. "Hello, darling," the older man drawled. "Your dad is selling a bike, huh?" I nodded. He looked over at me while his dog went crazy. "What about you?" he asked. I was confused and just stared up at him. He pointed at a sticker I had stuck on my shirt. "How much are they selling you for?" "Rusty brought his piggy bank, you know." He laughed as he said this last bit, but fortunately, there was no parking on either side of the street, and our driveway was full. There were a few cars behind them, so they had to keep going. As soon as they were past my house, I ran inside, up the stairs, and pulled the shade down on my window. I was terrified they would come back and find me. I just hid in my room until most of the people left, and my dad yelled up for me to pick up my toys because people kept thinking they were for sale. I didn't see Russell again that summer, but I did see his oldest brother. He drove by our house as I was playing in the driveway alone, and called out to me asking me if I wanted candy, laughing as he peeled away. When second grade started up, I was relieved that Russell wasn't in my class
Wow,
anymore.
that's like the
But
oldest
all the
line in
second
a
graders
book.
shared the
Do you
same
want some
lunch at
candy,
recess
little boy?
times. I just tried to
Like,
avoid Russell
everybody,
at all
they
costs,
ain't gonna
hanging
fall
out
for
with a
that
larger group of
anymore.
girls
I hope
instead.
not.
We went to watch a video at the library with another class again, and to my horror, it was Russell's class we were paired with. I sat on the floor this time, and a girl named Anna Liz sat behind me because she wanted to braid my hair. Russell sat next to me, and as the lights went out, tried to put his hand under my crisscrossed legs. Annalise saw him and loudly said, "Russell, what are you doing? Stop!" His face turned red and he scooted away. Kids chanted or taunt back at him in a sing-song on the way back to our classroom, and I was surprised none of the negative attention was directed at me. And of course, I was so happy that he was finally getting humiliated. He didn't really try to do anything else to me after that, besides call me names. My days were pretty easygoing for the rest of the school year. He wasn't in my third grade class either, and around this time, it was a pretty popular pastime to divulge in secret crushes, gossip about who suspected had a crush on who, then single whoever out and tease them about it. One girl called out loudly to Russell, who was sitting at another table. The girl yelled out to him that he liked me, and his friend, who was sitting beside him, joined in the teasing. "Yeah, you like her, don't you? You told me," while everyone else laughed and jeered. I cringed as my eyes floated over to where he was sitting. I dreaded seeing his gloating little face, as I had tried and been successful most of the year at avoiding it. But as I looked at him, I realized something was different. His face was completely impassive, and as the ruckus died down because he wasn't giving the teasers the reaction they wanted, I heard him clearly say, "I don't like her anymore. She's too old." Now, mind you, I just turned 9. Number 2. So, this happened back in 6th grade, and I think it's the closest I've ever come.
Thanks for watching, man. I really appreciate
At the
it.
school I went to, we always used to have some big end-of-the-year field trip. We'd usually go to some city and look at all the important or historic buildings, have lunch, learn things, and leave. That year, we were going to New York City. and me and a couple of friends planned out what we wanted to do. We wanted to go do our own thing, go shopping, get some new clothes, that kind of thing. Only when we got to school the next day, the teachers made it really clear we had to stick with the group. But since we're all stupid, rebellious sixth graders, we decided we'd just have to work around that. On the ride to New York, me, my friend Olivia, and my friend Devin decided we were going to leave the group and do whatever we wanted. Our class was pretty big, almost 60 of us because they put 5, 6, and 7 together. So we thought if we weren't gone too long, nobody would notice. We had brought money and we planned on buying tons of stuff, because even though we were a big class, we lived in a small town with only a couple of stores. Olivia loved shopping, and she had actually researched the area we were going to be around and picked out all the good stores. She even made us a little map. She was good at that kind of stuff. Anyways, when we got to New York, Devin chickened out because his parents were pretty strict, and he didn't want to get his phone taken away again. Olivia and I decided that he could just give us his money, and we'd buy his stuff for him. So he did that, and after they herded everybody off the bus, we kinda lingered back. We were right about them being distracted by everybody else, because we got away with no problem. Olivia's map worked out pretty good, and we were gone probably 10 or 20 minutes before things really started to get scary. We had just left the store, and Olivia was carrying her shopping bags when this guy noticed us. It probably wasn't hard to pick us out. 2 little sixth graders walking around alone, carrying a crap ton of clothes. He started calling out to us, saying how he could buy us more clothes and all the jewelry we wanted if we would just go with him. We didn't believe him, of course. We just kept walking and headed on to the next store. Only this guy just wouldn't stop talking. He started following us now, and getting kind of pissed that we wouldn't answer him. I told him to go to hell because I thought that he would take a hint. Now there are tons of people around, and we figured he couldn't really kidnap us in front of 200 people. He just kept following us still. Then he started getting a lot closer. He had probably been 30 or 40 yards back, where we could barely see him over the other people. But now he was only 15 or 20 feet. That's when we started panicking. Because damn, there was a frickin' child molester right behind us, and we have no idea where the group was. We decided to split off from the sidewalk and head down into some alley, because we figured people would call out the guy if he started to follow us. But of course, it was New York City, and everybody else was so wrapped up in their own little problems. So now we're walking down this dark frickin' alley, and this guy is still right after us. He fell a little back, probably about 30 feet now. Now he's not pretending to be a good guy anymore. He's talking about how he's gonna kill us, and how they'll never find our bodies, and how much fun he's gonna have with us. He's just smiling this deranged grin the whole damn time. We're both on the verge of tears now, because we figured this psychopath is about to kill us. Olivia just decides to drop her stuff and yells, "Run!" So we start running, and we're probably around halfway through this alley. But then she turns around, and then she screams. So naturally, of course, I turn around, and I see this psychopath chasing right after us, and he has a knife. We're both screaming now, and I'm running faster than I ever have before. And we just run out of the alley back into this crowd of people. As we try to get into this group of people, to make sure this guy can't stab us to death, I turn around. He's just standing back in the alley, smiling at us. I turn back around, and this random lady is asking us what's wrong because we're both sobbing, and Olivia's dress is ripped. There was, of course, the fact that I was bleeding because my arm scraped the wall and we're crying so hard that we can't talk. As soon as we can actually manage to talk, we tell her about our school. So she looks it up and calls them on a phone, and then we manage to find our group again. We're both forced to stay right next to the teachers because they don't trust us anymore. And honestly, I don't want to blame them. We didn't even tell them about the man, though. As soon as I got home, I'm grounded and my phone is taken away. But still, nobody but me and Olivia knows about that man. School ends a couple days later, and I get my phone back. I text Olivia, and she sends me a picture of her class in front of some important building and says, "Look in the bottom left corner." It was that damn man. He was right in that damn picture. Mostly hidden behind some wall, but you can still see his face, smiling that deranged grin for the camera. We never really talked about that man again. I didn't want to bring it up, and Olivia didn't either. I'm terrified of cities now, though. I like to stick to a couple towns near me, and that's it. And there's a lower chance of getting stabbed to death there. Number 3. Some background information. My dad had a roofing business, and two of his friends who had been part owners of the business decided they wanted to move back home. They had lived in a trailer with us until they left, and one of the guys even practiced Satanism. I'm not sure why my parents allowed these guys to live with us now that I think about it, but the guy had always been nice to me and my brother. Kind of like a kooky uncle, and my dad had been friends with him since he was a kid. Anyway, when he left a book called Necromonicon. I was a kid. I didn't have any clue what it was. We were moving too, so my dad just threw it in the yard sale we were having. Now it's getting late in the day. Mom and Dad are packing what is left of the yard sale stuff away when this creepy guy walks up and just starts looking through stuff. He's talking to himself and just looks like something out of an End of the Days movie. We'd seen him before, but he had never gotten this close. He picks up the Necromonicon up and proceeds to tell my dad about how he is into this devil stuff and wants to buy the book. The whole time, he was just eyeing me and my brother. My dad snatches the book from him and tells him to leave, because he isn't selling the book. The guy gives him an odd stare and does a slow walk off to talk to himself. I'm a kid and forget about all that thing right away. So, fast forward to a week later and the guy's back. He just comes up to our door and knocks. My dad opens it and he leans in and looks around. He ends up seeing me and his eyes just light up. He starts telling my dad that he saw a picture of me at this circus and he wanted to take me to see it. I'm a little kid and just excited at the idea of a circus and there being a picture of me there. I'm jumping up and down, asking to go. My dad tells me there's no circus and there is no picture. He pushes the guy off the porch and tells him that if he ever comes near us again, he would kill him. We'd moved soon after that, but I still went to the same school. For like a straight week, I noticed a girl I used to live across the street from the trailer park who wasn't at school anymore. When I did see her again, she didn't look the same. She was quiet and she was withdrawn. Later, I found out that the very same man who had been trying to take me to the circus had molested her. I'm sorry if this is all over the place. It happened over 20 years ago, and much of my childhood was crazy like this. I'm just glad my dad was there, and to the man who wanted to show me a picture, I'm glad we never met again. Number 4. This story isn't as freaky as some of the stories on here. It was just very odd, and I still think about it once in a while. It was in the early 90s, in Vancouver, on a really rainy day. Me and a friend were driving home in the mid-afternoon. That's when we decided to take a shortcut through an industrial area that was mostly train tracks. As I said, it was pouring rain down in the buckets. We saw this person riding a bike in the rain. It most certainly was a transvestite. Really badly dressed up one. He had crazy frizzy bright orange hair, badly applied, makeup, most of which was running down his face, and he was wearing what I can only describe as being circus clothes. He had a raggedy Harley Quinn type outfit with bright colors. Now the thing is, his bike wasn't a normal bike. It looked really old and creaky. His movements were very exaggerated and out of sync. Like, imagine that every time the pedals came around, his knees would be almost hitting his elbows. Everything was just very exaggerated. Well, he fell off his bike and into a puddle. I think that he fell on purpose and wanted us to come help him. The way that he fell looked so fake and so weird, and he lay on the ground and let out his childish wail. I can still see his mouth, with his bright reddish-orange lipstick smudges all over it, open so massively wide. He was sobbing, but it was in a fake theatrical voice. My friend was the driver, and we both let out a scream when he fell. "Should we go help him?" my friend asked. "No!" I yelled, and we sped off. We both felt really guilty and horrible afterward, but we both also felt that he fell on purpose because he wanted us to come over to him. We didn't know what might have happened had we tried to help him, because he might have said he was homeless and we'd somehow be stuck with him forever. My other thought was that he'd drag us down a storm drain, just like an It. Mainly, we both felt that he was bad news and that we'd seriously regret ever going over to help him. Number 5. This morning I had the day off of work and a few errands to run. They included getting the tabs renewed on my car and picking up a few items from Target. The nearest DMV to me was in the basement of a 12-story skyscraper, roughly half the distance between my apartment and Target. The building
think
has a
it's a
large
little bit
global
boring.
market on the main floor, with several shops.
Let's do something like with dolls or something. Scary stories, dolls. I'm gonna put. Alright, let's see here. Alright, so I'm gonna do the first one I see.
Annabelle was the focus of a case that famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren took part in during the early 1970s, and is highlighted in the book The Demonologist. It has been stated that this is one of the most unusual cases of a possessed object on record. In 1970, a mother purchased an antique Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store. The doll was a present for her daughter Donna on her birthday. Donna, at the time, was a student in college, preparing to graduate with a nursing degree, and resided in a tiny apartment with her roommate, Angie, a nurse as well. Pleased with the doll, Donna placed it on a bed as a decoration and didn't give it a second thought until a few days later. Within that time, both Donna and Angie noticed that there appeared to be something very strange and creepy about the doll. The doll apparently moved on its own. Relatively unnoticeable movements at first, like a change in position, but with the passage of time, the movement became more noticeable. Donna and Angie would come home to find the doll in a completely different room from which they had left it in. Sometimes, the doll would be found cross-legged on the couch with its arms folded. Other times, it was found upright, standing on its feet, leaning against the chair in the dining room. Several times, Donna, placing the doll on the couch before leaving for work, would return home to find the doll back in her room, on the bed, with the door closed. One night, Donna came home to find the doll had moved again. This time, it was on a bed. Donna had come to find that this was typical of the doll, but somehow she knew this time it was different. Something wasn't right. A sense of fear came over her when she inspected the doll and saw what looked like blood drops on the back of its hands and its chest. Seemingly from nowhere, a red liquid had appeared on the doll. Scared and desperate, Donna and Angie decided it was time to seek expert advice. Not knowing where to turn, they contacted a medium and a seance was held. Donna was then introduced to the spirit of Annabelle Higgins. The medium related the story of Annabelle to both Donna and Angie. Annabelle was a young girl that resided on the property before the apartments were built. She was a young girl of only 7 years old when her lifeless body was found in the field upon which the apartment complex now stands. The spirit related to the medium that she felt comfort with Donna and Angie and wanted to stay with them by moving into the doll. Feeling compassion for Annabelle and her story, Donna gave her permission to inhabit the doll and stay. They were soon to find out, however, that Annabelle was not what she seemed. Later that week, Donna saw that the doll, or Annabelle, was ripped and had jagged cuts along her mouth. One night, Donna awoke to some singing like a little girl. She walked into her bathroom to see Angie dead, with the words, "Wanna play?" written in the blood of her friend.
I'm leaving out the house.
Was never found.
I'm hauling ass out that house, alright?
Lou was friends with Donna and Angie, and had been with them since the day the doll arrived. He had never been fond of the doll, and on several occasions warned Donna that it was evil, saying that she should get rid of it. However, Donna had developed her personal tie to the doll and decided to keep it, despite Lou's feelings. Her decision was a terrible mistake. One night, Lou awoke with a jolt of terror, a jolt that didn't seem like it was from his usual nightmares. Somehow, something felt different. What would appear to be a common case of sleep paralysis became all too real. He looked around the room but couldn't discern anything out of the ordinary. At first, anyway. Looking down toward his feet, he saw the doll, Annabelle. It began to slowly glide up his leg, moving over his chest and stopping at his neck. Helpless against it, the doll began to strangle him.
What?
After a moment, Lou, at the point of asphyxiation, blacked out. He woke the next morning, certain it wasn't an ordinary night terror, and was determined to rid himself of that doll and the spirit that possessed it. Preparing for a road trip the next day, Lou and Donna were reading over maps alone in her apartment. The apartment was eerily quiet. The sound was broken when rustling sounds coming from Donna's room aroused fear that someone had broken into the apartment. Lou, determined to figure out what was causing the noise, quietly made his way to the bedroom door. He waited for the noise to stop before entering and turning on the light. The room was empty, except for Annabelle, whom was tossed in the corner on the floor. Lou searched the room for signs of forced entry, but nothing was out of place. As he got closer to the doll, he got the distinct impression that somebody was behind him. Spinning around, Lou found that, despite his unease, nobody besides himself and the doll were in the room. Then, in a flurry of motion, he found himself doubled over in pain, with blood dripping from a cut on his chest. Upon opening his shirt, there, on his chest, were what appeared to be 7 distinct claw marks. I hope you enjoyed this article, and should you ever want to visit the infamous Annabelle, she can be found at the Warren Occult Museum in Moodus, Connecticut. The museum is run by Lorraine Warren, the famous paranormal investigator, and now frequent guest on the television show Paranormal State. Housed in a glass case at the museum, you will find Annabelle. Mrs. Warren relates that
If you want me to see that, if you want me to go to that museum and see that and live stream it, leave a like and subscribe. Alright? 100 subscribes and I'll go to that museum and look at that doll. And I'll touch the glass if you want me to.
A toy company began selling realistic baby dolls to expectant mothers. But apparently, after the mother had a child, the toy baby would start crying. Eventually, the rocking motion, advertised to calm it down, wouldn't work, and you couldn't get it to stop without shaking it. Eventually, when it started crying, the parent would have to beat it, and the beatings and thrashings would have to get harder and harder to get it to be quiet. The only thing that seemed to shut the baby doll up permanently was to bash its head against the wall to destroy whatever mechanism triggered the crying. On more than one occasion, though, neighbours called the authorities to report child abuse, and when the police arrived, they found the bloody remains of infants smeared across the walls and on the floor. In most cases, the mother couldn't understand why the police were there. She just got rid of the stupid doll as she rocked a baby-shaped bundle in her arms. They called it the Doll Cemetery. It was a small valley, barren and deserted, behind a hill that hid it from the sight of the town. Nothing grew on its arid soil, The few trees that had tried were long dead, turned into wooden skeletons that stretched their hooked fingers to the sky above. The reason for that name was clear to anyone who visited the place. It had indeed the grim, gloomy air of old cemeteries, completely uncomforting. However, its guests were not underground, neither walled in narrow recesses. They stood in plain sight, fully exposed to eyes and weather. There were dolls of every kind and size, of every fashion, style and era. Ancient misses with painted porcelain faces, whose richly embroidered dresses were now reduced to mouldy rags, cheap rag dolls, or what was left of them, their smiles faded, but still visible on their deformed, swollen faces. Elegant catwalk models 10 inches tall, who once possessed clothes and accessories, and now stood naked and twisted into unlikely positions. Child dolls that had once walked, cried or called for their mummies, and now laid motionless, silent, often mutilated.
I'm gonna pause the stream
Some
real
of
fast,
those
alright?
that had been there long.
Alright, I'm back. Wait, let me do something and
Had
boom.
worn
Now
and
you can hear
faded.
it.
Most, though, had simply been left on the ground,
Hey, what's up, man? How you
and many
doing,
of them
man?
had been pushed around by the wind or
So
rain,
basically, I'm just
gathering in
reacting to
some
scary
hollow,
stories.
as if in a sad, common grave.
And if you want me to
No
do it
one
at
knew who
3
had
a.m.,
placed the
I'll do it
first
at
doll
3
there,
a.m.
or why. Even for the eldest of the town, it was a question without answer. But somehow, it started a sort of tradition. There were still girls who, forced to separate from their favourite doll, past beyond any chance of repair, asked for her to be brought there, among their peers. But it was a task for parents, because no child ever ventured there, not even for a dare. The doll cemetery was a grim and sad place, even in the full light of summer day.
Do you want me to restart
But
it
in night,
from the beginning?
or even worse, one of those dull days threatening rain,
there was
when
this
clouds
doll.
cast a
There was this doll named Annabelle, and so it was in a museum somewhere. So I said, if I get 100 subscribers, I will go to that museum and see that doll, and I will live stream it. How's that?
grey light over the whole place.
How does that sound?
It was impossible to walk through it and not be overwhelmed by a feeling of anguish, as if each of those little, abandoned bodies hosted a soul, silently screaming all of its torment to the ears of the living. Like any respectable graveyard, the doll's cemetery had a caretaker. Or at least, that is what the old homeless man who had found shelter in the badly assembled shack right in the middle of the valley was said to be. They said that, during the day, he walked around the place,
I know,
whispering
right?
incomprehensible words to the dolls, as if to comfort them, and that at night he went back to his shack and, behind the window or in the doorframe in the hot summer nights, stood vigilant, as if protecting a sacred place from whatever intruder. The townsfolk believed he was crazy, but harmless, especially because he never left the valley, and whoever wanted to find him always knew where he was. But in truth, nobody ever wanted to find him, at least until the girls disappeared. There were 3 friends, 15 years old, always together since nursery school. Once teens, they spent more time together than their respective families, from the morning meeting to go to school, to the late evening goodbye to go to sleep. Unless they managed to do that together as well, with short and infrequent interruptions for meals. The day when their parents could not find them in their rooms, their first thought was that they had secretly left, maybe by the window, to get together and do some of their mischief. It wouldn't have been the first time. When they weren't back for lunch or dinner, and late at night, none of the houses they could go back to had seen them come, worry started to spread in their families, and soon the whole town. They thought about an accident, something so serious that they weren't even able to call. Groups of volunteers were formed, and they searched for the girls everywhere, in the town and around it. But they didn't go behind the hill. Why should they? It was only when one of them brought back any news that the mother of one of the 3 remembered, shocked, what her daughter had told her a week, maybe 10 days ago, failing to elicit her attention. What she said about the caretaker of the Dulce Cemetery. That he had abused them. So the girl had said to a mother that didn't care to listen, knowing how frequently her daughter made up unbelievable stories to feed her lust for attention. He had approached them late at night, she had explained. He had tried to make them follow him. He tried to touch them, but they had fled. The parents of the second girl said they had heard nothing of that. They accused the poor woman, dumping on her the blame for what might have happened. They aroused the spirits of their neighbors and declared themselves ready to tear that shack down if that could help to find their daughter. But for the father of the third girl, a widower with a meek face and large body, the report had been no news. His daughter, too, had told him the same thing, but it couldn't have happened. That man never went into the town, everybody knew, and the girl had sworn she had never set foot in the cemetery. Clearly, it must be a misunderstanding, maybe a prank, he kept repeating. Going there would just be a waste of time. No one listened to him. They accused him of being a craven, of not caring about his daughter's fate. After all, when had he ever cared? Always away for work, with a poor girl left alone to her own devices, and the pressure that had been on the woman shifted on him. She might have been shallow, but he was a man. He ought to have done something, immediately, before the worst happened. His words, his apparent attempts to clear the homeless man, were worth nothing, except maybe to exacerbate the people even more. A compact group of men, armed with a wrath they deemed right and with bad intentions, joined the parents of the girls to go to the Dulce Cemetery in the unshakable belief that the girls would be found there. And they were. The first, the one who had said nothing
Hey,
to
did
her
you say where's
parents,
the museum
had
at?
been tied to a tree with iron wire,
Sorry, I was paying attention to something else
with her
real fast.
arms open wide to the heavens, her calm face, her head dangling forward on her broken neck. She looked like an angel who wanted to keep vigil on that place of death, now real. Cries of rage rose from the crowd, who started to march faster. Still, even before such evidence, the widower kept saying that It was
I'm gonna
impossible.
rewind the video
That the
real fast.
caretaker couldn't have done that.
I'm at 17:58 seconds. So
Turning on the light. The room was empty, except for Annabelle, whom was tossed in the corner on the floor. Lou searched the room for signs of forced entry, but nothing was out of place. As he got closer to the doll, he got the distinct impression that somebody was behind him. Spinning around, Lou found that, despite his unease, nobody besides himself and the doll were in the room. Then, in a flurry of motion, he found himself doubled over in pain, with blood dripping from a cut on his chest. Upon opening his shirt, there, on his chest, were what appeared to be 7 distinct claw marks. I hope you enjoyed this article, and should you ever want to visit the infamous Annabelle, she can be found at the Warren Occult Museum in Moodus, Connecticut. The museum is run by Lorraine Warren, the famous,
I think Nudist, Connecticut or something like that.
paranormal investigator, and now a frequent guest on the television show.
No, it wasn't 15, it wasn't 16, it was, there you go.
Edgar couldn't have done that. The second girl was halfway to the center of the valley. She sat on the ground, her back leaning on a trunk, her arms limp at her sides. Her ears had been ripped away from her head violently, and rivulets of blood painted her face, running down her cheeks. A fabric ribbon that maybe once had been light green had been tied over her mouth. It would have been a poor gag if she had still been able to talk. The dramatically belated rescuers started to run. Maybe there was still a chance to save the last girl, even though her
Wait,
very
did you hear
father,
where it was at?
surely out of his mind by now, was
Sorry, I'm
shouting
still
for them
paying
to
attention
stop,
to something else real
to
fast.
stay away from the shack. And there, on the door, they found the last one, the widower's daughter. She'd been thrown into the ground with no regard, in a tangled heap. Her face was livid and bloody, her clothes marked by little round stains. Her mouth was open wide in a scream she would never be able to utter, because her tongue
So
lied
I'm gonna
aside,
visit that doll if I get
in a pool
100
of blood that
subscribers.
looked like some beast had walked on it.
If
But for sure,
I get
no
100
beast,
subscribers.
not a real one.
And I will live
I've done
stream
that
my
to her.
experience at looking at
No
the
one
doll.
wanted to hear
I'm
anything
gonna
else.
touch the
The
glass screen
shouted
just because
ramblings
I
of the
can.
widower got lost in those of the crowd,
Savage over
inciting
9,000.
itself to avenge the girls. The man stepped back as someone kicked down the door of the shack. Then everybody else did the same when the stench, coming from within, assaulted them like a living beast, as if it had been lurking in wait behind those weak planks. No revenge would ever take place. The caretaker of the doll cemetery lied lifeless on the floor of what had been his home. His skin was livid, his body swollen, and a pool of dried blood surrounded his head like a macabre halo. He had been dead for days, weeks maybe. Silence suddenly fell on the crowd. Nothing could be heard, except the gulps of those who had lost their daughters, and the flutters of the wings of some birds, or maybe the sound of small footsteps moving away. Glances were exchanged, full of questions nobody wanted to speak, and answers nobody wanted to hear. Then, all eyes converged on the only one who had never wanted to go there, who's now walking away slowly, looking down,
I mean,
his
if I do
chest
make
with
it to
his
100,
hands.
which I'm probably not.
They saw him stumble towards the hill,
Not sure, but I'm just
then
gonna
suddenly stop
keep making
to free the
videos
hem of
every
his
single day.
trousers from
Keep
the
live
hand of the
streaming
doll
every single day.
that must have got stuck into
Till
her.
I get to that point, till I
They
get to
saw him
100.
tremble, as he shook his leg, as if in panic, then turn around and disappear behind the hill with a brisk step. From that day, nobody set foot in the Doll Cemetery anymore.
Little Tikes makes it easy for little hands to build big with waffle blocks.
It is the thing that Hollywood films are made of. Even more, particularly, it is reminiscent of Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. An unnamed family, similar to any other average family, did what all families do as the children start to grow up. They had to decide that the outgrown toys, cluttering the kids' room, should be got rid of or stored away. As usually happens, with many things that were cherished by the children, several of them were stored away in the attic. Amongst them was a doll, an ordinary baby-faced doll. Run the clock forward 11 years. Attics do not have an endless capacity for storage, or perhaps the family had decided to move to a new home. For whatever reason, a sort-out was needed. If your imagination is the director of the story, then now is the time to pick your lighting and camera angle. Because one can only imagine the horror on the face of the person, or the hair sticking up in the back of the neck, when they picked up that doll to find this. The doll had aged, and now had the face of a very old person. The skin was drawn back to an almost zombie-like, or even mummified appearance. What makes it more unnerving to look at are the human qualities of it, particularly those eyes, which appear to be staring straight at you. What had caused this? Had, as the Express suggested, demonic forces set to work? Or was it like Dorian Gray's portrait, and had withered and aged? For whatever reason, it had happened. The family were not keeping it, and gave it away. Jim Eaton, expert of the paranormal and
And
author
8
of
o'clock I'm
Ghosts
going to do
Caught
a
on
Dragon
Film
Ball Z
2,
Dokkan Battle
said,
live stream,
"This is a
alright?
picture of what the doll looked like before it was given away. We can only wonder at what condition it is in now." Apparently the family had given it away. The doll was later sold on for a considerable amount of money. As Jim Eaton said, what it looks like now, we can only guess at. What caused it, we can only speculate on.
Alright, let's watch another one. So I'm thinking, how about, let me look here. I mean, there's a lot of stories, so, but alright, I'm gonna watch this. 3 true terrifying haunted dolls stories.
Before I get started,
Jeez.
you should know that I'm not easy to scare. I really enjoy horror movies, mainly because I'm always looking for the one that can make me actually feel scared, which has become harder and harder as
Oh,
these
you're
days
back. Oh, so you
with
left?
the prevalence of nothing but jump scares. My
So
girlfriend, on the
that
other hand,
video ended, so we
is
had to make,
terrified of
we
scary
gotta
movies
go
and
to a
has
new
tons
video.
of phobias, but she still loves going to see them, and getting scared makes her a little hot, if you know what I mean. One of her biggest fears is creepy dolls. So what do I decide to get her for a birthday present but an old porcelain doll? I figured it'll pay off, you know, and if not, I got her a couple of other things she's been hinting at. Anyway, I'd been hunting for a doll that was appropriately creepy, but not way out of my price range. It's kind of funny how many people put up online that they have a haunted doll, just trying to squeeze some extra money out of their mom's old junk. I tried some of the major antique malls in the area, and tried all the thrift stores, but no luck, until 2 days ago. I was in a different town for a doctor's appointment and found one of those old little hole-in-the-wall antique shops. The kind that can't be profitable, but they own the building so they stick around. I went out on a whim, not really even thinking about the doll idea, and started poking around. There wasn't anyone behind the counter when I walked in, so I figured it was okay just to look. There were rows and rows of shelves in that place. It almost felt like it was bigger on the inside, but that's not something that happens outside of TV. Each shelf was filled with, well, mostly junk. There were a couple of nice things, a couple of silver candlesticks, and a cool old butter churn, a pair of cavalry sabers from the Civil War, but nothing I needed to buy. And then I saw it. It was sitting on the shelf above the cracked ship's wheel and next to the jar of buttons. This doll, I looked at it and didn't think it was super creepy or anything, but for whatever reason, it had only $5 on it. Hey, why not, you know? I reached up to get it down, and it had just begun to turn around when I heard a voice directly from behind me. "Can I help you?" It was an old woman, ancient even. She was at least 90. She was incredibly skinny, and her bones stuck out in weird ways. Her eyes were a watery gray color, behind these massive glasses.
Thanks for the image in my head.
Yes. I think I'm gonna buy this doll, I said, and held it out to her. She nodded and walked slowly behind her counter and began to push the buttons on the register. It was then that I had the thought, out of curiosity, why is this thing only $5? I said, expecting her to tell me that it was moldy or something. "Oh, no reason," she said. "I just wanted to give it a good home." I shrugged and handed her the cash. As she gave me change, she looked at the doll. "Such a pretty doll," she said, stroking its head once, and then she let out a nasty, wet cough. I smiled awkwardly and said goodbye, picking the doll up. "Be careful not to drop her," she said, and as I was walking out the door, I could swear I heard her voice say something like, "See you soon." Though the way she said it, I'm sure it wasn't directed at me. The rest of the day was pretty boring, and when I got back to my house, I was ready to do the requisite amount of gaming a man in his 20s is required to do. I live way out in the middle of nowhere, in my parents' old house up in the Appalachian Mountains. They died recently. It's surrounded by woods. It's about a 30-minute drive into town. I was greeted at the door by my dog, Sarah, who, in classic dog fashion...
Hey, any stories, any scary stories if you want me to watch, I'll watch them at 3 a.m. You know, 'cause like the 3 a.m. challenge and junk. So, I'm gonna put for the title, do not watch scary stories at 3 a.m. So I can get views like crazy. Right? No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I'll do it at 3 a.m. if you want me, you know, to watch any scary stories that you saw. Alright?
demanded to play immediately. She was jumping up and down, happy as a dog can be, until I opened up the bag with a doll in it. Her ears immediately lowered, and she started growling at the thing. If I hadn't had quick reflexes, she would have ripped the thing right there. I hurried and ran into the bedroom and stuck it on the table before running out to calm her down, and didn't think about it for a while. That night, when I was about to turn in, I glanced at where I thought I had set the doll down and realized it wasn't there. Now, this is not as creepy as it sounds. I have a history of forgetting where I set things. Glancing around, I realized it was sitting on my bedside table, almost as if it had been posed. My reaction, as most people's would have been, was nope. I turned it over, face down on the table, and went to bed. That night, I had an incredibly vivid dream. It was one of those floaty dreams, where you just feel like you're watching someone else. It seemed to be a 1920s speakeasy. Everyone was dressed up and dancing and drinking and smoking. A man in a burly tuxedo stood watch at the door, and there was a jazz band playing on the stage. The lead singer was this really energetic, scrawny guy, dancing around as he sang. But the dream soon fixated on the couple who were on the dance floor. A young man with short black hair wearing a suit, dancing with a gorgeous woman in a gold black dress. They were all over each other, and the woman was a little more drunk. Their words really didn't seem to make much sense to me, but I did catch that her name was Missy at one point. The man went off to the restroom, and the woman
Alright, so
sat
what I'm
breathlessly
gonna
by the
do, I'm gonna
bar,
end this live
and then
stream,
everything
this
went to
one.
hell.
I'm gonna end it
The
at
man
5
burst
o'clock.
in from the front door.
And then
The
at
bouncer
8
pulled a
o'clock, I'm
gun,
gonna do
and the
Dokkan.
men pulled their own.
And end that
There were
at 10. I'm
gunshots
gonna
and
start at 8
screaming.
and at 10.
Everyone was running around.
Wait, let me pause the video. And then, just, you know, if you stay up long enough, you can watch the 3 a.m. one. That sound good?
Trying to get out of the bar, but there was only one exit. The last thing I saw before I woke up was Missy, slumping over in her seat, collapsing onto the bar. I woke up panting and covered in sweat. All my covers were down at the foot of my bed, and my pillows were strewn all over the place. I rolled over to grab my phone to look at the clock and just about yelled. The
Great.
doll had rolled next to me in the bed, her eyes fixed onto mine. It was then I realized that she was wearing the exact same dress as the woman in the dream. I'm writing this now at 4 in the morning. The doll is back up on the table, facing the opposite way. I'm sure it's all in my head, but I swear when I picked her up, she was a little heavier than yesterday, and the body was a little softer. It's starting to snow outside, and there's no way I'm getting into town today. I feel like I must have pulled something while I was sleeping, because my neck and wrists were really stiff. It's hard just to move my head about without moving my whole body. My ankles are sore, but maybe it's just a cold. My grandmother was the sweetest person you could ever meet. She was the stereotypical grandmother, always giving us kids little treats and warm hugs. I used to love spending the night at her house. She would bake cookies while I played in her yard, but there was always something about her house that unnerved me. At night, I would hear things in the attic, almost like boxes being pushed around or light banging sounds. All the family heard these things when they stayed over at her house.
Those things are creepy.
Everyone
They
but
look like
her, actually.
Annabelle.
She would
Little
never
brother
admit
and
to hearing
sister.
the sounds. Now whether she did hear them or just played it off as a huge debate to my family. But one thing was for sure, she would never let anyone go up into the attic to investigate. My poor grandma passed away a few weeks ago, and in the process of cleaning up her house, we finally decided to see what was in that attic. It was cold up there, as a lack of insulation in the cold early May weather would do to any room. As far as any one of us could see, there was just a bunch of old boxes in the corner of the room. My dad did a sweep, looking for signs of squirrels or other rodents that could be scurrying around.
And if you're at any live streams, can you you know, comment like you know, 3 a.m. challenge at Savage or something like that? I would really appreciate that. You know, so more people can watch. Feel what I'm saying?
But found no sign of anything there. Finally, we brought the boxes down and looked at them. The boxes were filled with old dolls. They were old handmade cloth dolls that mothers gave to their daughters to play with back in the turn of the century. We were all kind of disappointed, as we expected it to be some family treasure that my grandma was hiding. We put all the dolls back into the boxes and loaded them up into the truck. As I was the only one close to the house with any sort of storage space, I decided all the stuff would go into my basement until we could sell or donate it, or just try to get rid of everything. So we drove over to my house and unloaded the truck. That night, I couldn't sleep. This is nothing out of the ordinary, as many nights I can't sleep actually. I decided to go into the kitchen for a midnight snack. Food in the belly always helps knock me out. I slowly make my way downstairs into the kitchen, but stop before I flip on the kitchen light. I could hear faintly, but clear as day, scuffling noises coming from the basement. Now, there's only one way to get into the basement, and that is a doorway in the kitchen. I think something got in through the windows and go down to have a look. I open the door and slowly make my way down, trying not to spook whatever was making the noise. I reach the bottom and feel for a light switch. I flip on the light switch and try to hold back a scream. All the dolls have been taken out of the boxes, and set up in a circle on the floor. I look around and see something move behind a box. I quickly kick the box aside and see one of the dolls sitting there. I lean in and pick it up, looking at the strange thing. It was made out of simple white cloth with orange yarn for hair, black buttons for eyes, and painted on a smile that had faded into a twisted pink line. As I looked at the doll, the light bulb overhead suddenly went out. I quickly made my way up the stairs, which thankfully still had lights from the kitchen coming down, when I felt something pinch my hand. I dropped the doll out of reflex and run upstairs, turning around just in time to see the doll disappear into the cover of darkness. I stood in the kitchen for a while, trying to figure out what had happened. I told myself that maybe my daughter had gotten into the box and set up the dolls. I was half asleep, and I got freaked out when the lights went out. I hit my hand on something while I was running, and I threw the doll. And when I turned around, it was sliding on the smooth tile floor. I decided it was time to go to bed and went back upstairs. The next morning, I asked my daughter about the dolls at breakfast, but she didn't know anything about them. I passed it off and continued on getting ready for work. I was all ready to go, and the last thing to put on was my watch. But it wasn't on the dresser like normal. I looked all around and couldn't find the thing. I decided to ignore it and look for it later when I got home. I got a call at work from my wife later that day, saying that she had found my watch, but it was in the basement next to this creepy doll. My blood ran cold when I heard that. I admitted I had no idea how it could have gotten down there, not daring to tell her what had happened the night before. I decided to stay up that night to see if I could catch the doll moving again. I got up around 11, telling my half-awake wife I was going to get a drink in the kitchen, something she was used to by that point, and to go back to sleep. I went down and sat at the table, watching the door all night for any sign of activity. Finally, at around 2 o'clock, I heard a thud at the door and watched as it slowly opened. I didn't turn the light on, but it was the same doll from the night before. I watched, wide-eyed, almost shitting myself, as it walked out of the door into the hall. I quickly grabbed the thing, taking it by surprise, and ran out back to the grill. The thing was shockingly strong, and it was all I could do to keep my grip on it as I reached into my back pocket to grab my lighter. I quickly sparked a flame and brought it to the thing, instantly catching it on fire. I lifted up the lid of the grill and threw the thing in. I waited and watched as smoke poured out of the top. Then, in the silence of the night, I heard it, a deep, almost demonic laugh coming from the grill. I backed away, never taking my eyes off of it. The laughing began to get louder, echoing inside of the metal grill. I stood there, frozen for what seemed like hours, till it finally stopped. I walked over and lifted up the lid. Nothing was left but a small pile of ash, and very oddly, I sat around watching TV and finally fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, the first thing that I heard was static coming from the TV. I turned around. All of them were just looking at me and watching me. I jumped up and ran to the door,